So my second question is, when should one start, right? That's number one. And two, in context of Gen Z, which is, the youngest of the generation and the eldest of the Gen Z would be about 25, 26, right? How can they build a bank of stories? So number one, when should one start consciously thinking about it? And second, how do we help them build a bank of stories?
Okay. So they should start as soon as they can, as soon as they become aware. Yeah. So whoever's listening to your podcast today and they resonate with the fact, hey, stories can be powerful, they start at the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because why waste a resource that you have? Because everyone is actually a storyteller. Yeah. They keep asking me this question. You're more than 3,500 very, very senior leaders have gone through my programs. I haven't taught a single person storytelling. Why? Because I don't need to. We are all storytellers. We just need to be, like you said, what's the difference between storytelling at the bar and the boardroom? Yeah. So how do you tighten that? But the fact is we have that skill. So why not use it from now? Right. So I would recommend highly that you start not just here intuitively. We all, even today, if anyone, even a Gen Z person in office, I'm sure they would tell a few stories. Yeah. They won't label it stories. They may be talking about my experience with the customer. That's a story, right? So what we are telling them is, can you do it with intention? Yeah. So that they should start immediately. Now, the next question is, where do they find these stories?
Yeah.
Now, to me, there are three big buckets of stories that you can find. And my biggest and most favorite bucket is my own stories.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So if I would ask any Gen Z or anybody in office, do you share opinions and advice during your whole office day? They'll all say, yes, we do. Right? Doesn't matter how soon junior say, you have opinions, you have pieces of advice. Now, our next question is, where do you find these pieces of advice from? Or where do your opinions come from? They're not pulled out of thin air, right? Mm-hmm. Even for a Gen Z. And the answer would be experiences, right? Either my own experience or an experience of someone else that I've heard, read, or seen. Those are the only two places you can get your opinions or advice that you give, no matter which level of the hierarchy you are. Mm-hmm. Now, if I were to translate that into my language, all our opinions and all the advice we give comes from stories we've been part of, or stories that we have heard, read, or seen. And so my sort of advice as starting point advice would be, every time you're going to give an opinion which you want people to listen to, ask yourself, why do you believe this opinion is true? What happened in your life that made you have this opinion, or what happened that reinforced this opinion? And that could be an opinion that you have because of an experience you had or an experience someone else had. That's your story. Yeah. So now the issue, bigger issue, Nikhil, is not just finding stories. Of course, that's an issue. And we're just talking about the first bucket, which is your own experiences. The issue is finding the story when you need it. Right? Now, because I'll tell you, for example, let me give you ask you a question, and the listeners can extrapolate from here and think about this question in their head as well. Mm-hmm. Let's say I asked you, do you believe, Nikhil, that skills and competencies are not enough to guarantee success? Do you agree with it?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I'm sure most of your listeners would agree with that. Mm-hmm. Now, if I were to ask you that instead of just giving that opinion in a meeting, let's say you're going to have a meeting just now where the opinion you'll share is skills and competencies are not good enough or enough to guarantee success. And I said, this is an Indian audience, Nikhil. Can you think of a story that all of them will resonate with, that you can use to start your speech? I'm not sure, but for most people, it will not pop like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I know for a fact, Nikhil, you and everyone else listening today knows two stories, at least. Yeah. The first, do you know the story about Sachin Tendulkar and Vinod Kamli?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't that a great story, that skills and competencies alone cannot guarantee success?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you go back to their Harris Shield days, where they still hold the record of the unbeaten 600 and whatever. During those days, even people like Kapil, they've said that technically Kamli was a better batsman.
Yeah.
That time, right? And in fact, Kamli, if I'm not mistaken, still holds the record for the highest number of centuries in the first 10 innings of a career.
Yeah.
Which means skill and competency was there, right? But it vanished. Right? Now, here's the second one, a story that I will never use, but I know you know. Do you know the story of an animal race where the faster animal went to sleep and the slower animal won?
No.
The hare and the tortoise story?
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, if skill and competency was enough, then the hare should have won, right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason I won't use that is I don't use made-up stories ever, because there are enough factual stories to use. So the question is, why couldn't you remember the two stories you knew? And the reason is that the way our brain searches for stories in our head, the search index, is either plot or character. So when I told you, do you know the story about Vinod Kamli and Sachin Tendulkar? I give you character and you said, I know the story.
Yeah.
Or when I give you the plot of the faster animal went to sleep, I know the story. But in a business context, you'll never say, I need the story when I need the Sachin story. You'll say, I need the skill story. Right? So what everyone needs to do is to find a way. And the way I recommend in my courses is to use an app. Any app that can tag your database and put your stories there, even the stories that you know well, but tag it with the business message you want to you think this will do. So that the next time you need to find a story about the business message, you go to your database and search for skill and competency. And those two stories are waiting there, right? So one is they can tap into the first bucket, which is their experiences. Now, some people may ask, do I need to put my own experiences into the database? Of course, yes, because you know your experience as that experience. You don't know it as the business point. Yeah. Let me give you a made-up example. Let's say I was a very good cricketer. Yeah. And I was a very good batsman. And when we used to do the practice in school, if I got to bat, I probably would bat half the day. Right. But that wouldn't be good for the team. So after a few overs, I would somehow either lob a catch or I would do a hit wicket and give it to people, right? That's a great story about teamwork, right? But in my head, I don't know that as a story of teamwork. I know as a story of that I used to give up my batting. So I used to give up my batting and put it into the database, but tag it as teamwork. So that when I'm looking for a teamwork story, I find that story, right? So that's for the first bucket. The second bucket is stories other people tell. Yeah. If once you're aware about stories, you will find them everywhere. Right. And so you will hear a boss tell a story, you will hear a customer tell a story, or your colleague tell a story. If you think that's a powerful story, it needs to go back into your database. Yeah. Books, many books, actually every business book has stories. Some have more stories than the others. As a starting point, and this is not the world's biggest story bank, the Storyworks website, which is our website, www.storyworks.com, has two playlists. Yeah. One is called the Story Bank playlist, where we already have some 75 stories and we add a story every week. Yeah. And it's not just a video about the story, but it also says, how can you use it in business? Yeah. And we have another playlist called Leaders Speak, where I've interviewed leaders and asked them about some opinion. And then I've asked them the same question. What happened in your life that makes you have this opinion? And they've told me the story. Now, I would recommend people to go there, not because I'm saying this is the stories that you need to save. Stories trigger stories. When you hear someone's story, you remember another story of your own. So either you'll find a great story from our story bank, but you also might remember other stories by listening to some of these stories. So those are the three buckets, I would say. One, your own stories. Two, stories from books. And as a starting point, our website as a starting point.